Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these episodes as you fall asleep, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Before you fall asleep, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see listeners from around the world. And if you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new nightmare. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's welcome the Nightmare Igniter. Story 1. The first time I saw the patient in room 9, he asked me why the nurses had stopped aging. The second time, he asked why I had. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 32 when I started working nights as a medical records clerk at Apex Hospital in Western Pennsylvania. I had taken the job because my wife, Leah, was pregnant with our first child, and the night shift paid enough to cover the medical bills we were already accumulating. Apex was the oldest hospital in the county. Most of it had been renovated into bright corridors with polished floors and digital screens, but the eastern wing remained sealed behind fire doors. It had once housed long-term patients before a flood damaged the lower floors in 1987. My supervisor, Mrs. Bell, trained me during my first week. She was a narrow woman with silver hair, sharp glasses, and a voice that never rose above a whisper. Paper files from before 1990 are stored downstairs, she told me. You won't need them unless the system generates a legacy request. What's a legacy request? You'll recognize one. She handed me an old brass key. East Archive. Don't enter Ward E. Isn't it condemned? Yes. Then why would I enter it? Mrs. Bell studied me through her glasses. People get curious at night. The hospital changed after midnight. The smell of disinfectant became stronger. Fluorescent lights buzzed louder in empty hallways. Elevators opened without being called, and the ventilation system sometimes carried sounds that resembled coughing. The other night clerk was Marcus Hill, a nursing student with a constant supply of energy drinks and sarcastic comments. He pointed at the security monitor one night. There's your legacy request. A new record had appeared on my screen. Patient, Arthur Vale. Date admitted, March 14th, 1974. Status, in treatment. Room, E9. No discharge date. I refreshed the page. The file remained. Wardy has been closed for decades, I said. Marcus opened another can. Maybe Arthur hasn't heard. The system requested a paper chart confirmation. I used the brass key and took the elevator to the basement archive. The room smelled of wet cardboard and dust. Metal shelves filled the space from wall to wall, holding thousands of aging folders. Arthur Vale's chart was already lying on the central table. I had not touched it. The folder was thick, its cardboard softened by time. Inside were handwritten notes from different doctors. Patient remains responsive. Patient insists treatment is complete. Discharge postponed pending observation. The first note was dated 1974. The final one had been written that night. At 1:13 a.m. The ink was still wet. I called Marcus downstairs. He read the note twice. Who has access to this room? Mrs. Bell. You. Me. He touched the ink. It's fresh. A bell rang somewhere beyond the archive. One clear metallic note. Marcus looked toward the eastern wall. What's behind there? Ward E. We followed the sound through a storage corridor. At the end, we found a set of faded blue doors chained shut. The bell rang again from the other side. Then a man coughed. Marcus stepped closer. Hello. A weak voice answered. Is that the new orderly? We're hospital staff, I said. Who are you? A pause followed. Arthur Vale. The chain tightened against the handles as something pushed from inside. I'm ready to go home, he said. I called security. Officer Jim Navarro arrived 10 minutes later, irritated at being pulled away from the emergency entrance. He was broad, practical, and completely unimpressed by anything he could not write into a report. "There's no patient wing behind these doors," he said. "We heard someone. Pipes. The pipes know their own name." Jim removed the chain and tested the door. It opened. Beyond it stretched a dim hospital corridor. The wallpaper was yellowed, and the floor was covered with green linoleum. Old glass lamps glowed along the ceiling. The air smelled of iodine, mildew, and boiled vegetables. "That shouldn't be here," Jim said. According to the building plans, the old ward had been demolished after the flood. We entered anyway. Our flashlights seemed weak against the darkness. Metal bed frames stood behind open doors. Blankets sagged as though bodies rested beneath them, but each bed was empty when we looked closer. At the nurse's station, a telephone began ringing. Marcus answered it. His face changed. He slowly handed the receiver to me. A woman was speaking. "Room 9 requires evening medication." "Who is this?" "Nurse Whitcomb." I glanced at the dusty station. A frame staff photograph hung on the wall. Nurse Eleanor Whitcomb, 1976. The woman in the picture had no face. The call ended. Jim told us to leave. As we turned back, wheels squeaked behind us. A medication cart rolled around the corner by itself. Small paper cups sat along the top. Each had a patient's name written on it. Arthur Vale, Marcus Hill, Jim Navarro, Daniel Mercer. My stomach tightened. Jim knocked the cart over. The cups scattered across the floor. From every empty room came the sound of patients sitting up. Bed springs groaned. Curtains shifted. Bare feet touched the linoleum. We ran. The corridor had lengthened. The blue doors were no longer visible. Instead, the hallway ended at room 9. The door stood open. An elderly man sat upright in bed. He was thin enough that his hospital gown hung like fabric from a wire frame. His skin was pale and waxy. A plastic identification band circled his wrist. Arthur Vale. He looked at me with clear gray eyes. "You finally found my file," he said. "How are you alive?" He smiled without humor. "They keep changing the word." "What word?" He pointed toward the chart clipped to the foot of his bed. "Treatment." Someone had crossed it out and written observation. Observation had been crossed out and replaced with recovery. Then evaluation. Then isolation. Each word was written in a different decade's ink. "As long as I'm being treated," Arthur said, "I'm still a patient." Marcus stepped closer. "Who keeps writing the notes?" Arthur looked past us. "The doctors." Figures stood behind the frosted glass wall of the room. White coats, surgical masks, motionless heads. Jim raised his flashlight. "This ward is closed." One of the figures entered. The doctor's coat was stained yellow with age. His face appeared blurred, as though I were viewing it through moving water. A name badge identified him as Dr. Harrow. He opened Arthur's chart. "Patient displays agitation," he said. Arthur began trembling. "Please, don't let him add anything." Dr. Harrow wrote a new line. "Discharge postponed due to violent behavior." Arthur screamed. His body jerked backward against the bed. Leather restraints appeared around his wrists, materializing as the pen moved. I grabbed the chart. The doctor turned toward me. His features shifted beneath his skin, forming several different faces before settling into none. "Interference with treatment," he said. The other doctors entered. The room expanded around us. Beds unfolded from the walls. 3 new charts appeared at their feet. Our names were printed on them. Jim swung his flashlight at the nearest figure. It passed through the doctor's head, but Jim's arm came back covered in frost. The doctor wrote something. Jim collapsed. A hospital bracelet appeared around his wrist. "Security officer experiencing delusions." Marcus dragged him toward the door. I held Arthur's chart. "If I destroy this, does it end?" Arthur's eyes filled with panic. "It may end me. Is that what you want?" He looked toward the doorway. Behind the doctors, the corridor had changed. A woman stood there holding the hand of a small boy. Both wore clothing from the 1970s. Arthur whispered, "My wife." The woman did not smile. She looked exhausted. The boy had Arthur's gray eyes. "You've been gone 50 years, she said. Arthur began crying. "I was trying to get discharged. You never came home." Dr. Harrow reached for the chart. I tore the final page in half. The doctor screamed through every speaker in the ward. Lights burst overhead. Doors flew open along the corridor, revealing patients from different decades. Men in iron lung machines. Children in old wheelchairs. Women behind stained privacy curtains. All of them watched me. All of them wore identification bands. Marcus shouted, "Daniel, move." The doctors closed around us. I ran to the nurse's station with Arthur's chart and found the discharge stamp beside the telephone. It was old, heavy, and stained with red ink. Mrs. Bell stood on the other side of the desk. I had not seen her enter. She wore a nurse's uniform beneath her coat. The same uniform from the faceless photograph. "Put the file down," she said. "You knew he was here. We all knew. Why hide it?" "Because he is the last patient." The ward groaned around us. Mrs. Bell glanced toward the ceiling. When Apex opened, doctors believed illness could be contained in records. Name the disease. Describe the symptoms. Keep the patient under observation. And something learned to live inside the diagnosis. The lights pulsed. "It needs one active patient," she continued. "One unfinished case. Arthur keeps it confined to Wardy. What happens if I discharge him? It finds another patient." My hand tightened around the stamp. The doctors were dragging Marcus back toward room 9. Jim lay unconscious on a bed that had not existed seconds earlier. Arthur looked at me. "Please," he said. "I thought of Leah at home, 7 months pregnant. I imagined my name appearing in the hospital system, my life reduced to notes written by something that would never allow recovery. Then I saw Arthur's family waiting in the corridor. Not illusions. Memories. They had aged and died while he remained trapped in treatment. I stamped the chart. Discharged. The sound that followed was not a scream. It was a breath released after 50 years. Arthur's restraints opened. His body became lighter, his edges fading into the dim room. He looked toward his wife and son. They held out their hands. He stood for the first time since 1974. "Thank you," he said. Then all three disappeared. The ward convulsed. Doctors collapsed into empty coats. Beds overturned. Medical charts erupted from the walls in a cyclone of paper. Mrs. Bell grabbed my arm. "Now it needs a patient." A printer began running at the nurse's station. A fresh admission form slid onto the floor. Patient, Leah Mercer. Reason for admission, pregnancy complications. I felt the world narrow. "That's my wife." The ward whispered her name. I seized the form and tore it apart. Another printed. Then another. The walls filled with the sound of unborn children crying. Marcus reached the fire alarm. He pulled it. Sprinklers released black water that smelled of river mud. Ceiling tiles collapsed, revealing rusted pipes and rotting wood. The demolished ward began returning to its real condition. We carried Jim toward the exit as walls crumbled behind us. Mrs. Bell remained at the desk. "A hospital always has patients," she called after us. "You can't discharge everyone." The blue doors reappeared ahead. We escaped seconds before the eastern corridor collapsed. The hospital officially blamed an old structural failure. Jim recovered but resigned. Marcus left nursing school. Mrs. Bell vanished. Human Resources claimed no one by that name had ever worked at Apex. Leah gave birth safely 2 months later. Our daughter, Sophie, was healthy. For 6 years, I believed Arthur's discharge had ended it. Then Sophie developed a fever last winter. We took her to a neighborhood clinic. The doctor said it was viral and sent us home. That night, I logged into the patient portal to check her test results. A second record appeared beneath hers. Patient, Daniel Mercer. Date admitted, March 14th, 1974. Status, in treatment. Room, E9. At the bottom of the page, someone had added a note in fresh black ink. The patient continues to believe he escaped. Story 2. The elevator at St. Catherine's Hospital had buttons for 12 floors, but on the night my brother disappeared, it stopped at floor 19. The doors opened onto an operating ward that had burned down 37 years before either of us was born. My name is Andrew Keller. I was 35 when this happened. I worked as an accountant for a small construction company, and hospitals made me nervous long before St. Catherine's gave me a reason to fear them. My younger brother, Matthew, had been admitted after crashing his motorcycle on a rain-slick road outside Pittsburgh. He had fractured his left leg and suffered a concussion, but the doctors assured us he would recover. Our mother had died 6 months earlier, and Matthew was the only close family I had left. He was reckless, sarcastic, and exhausting, but when the emergency room doctor called, I drove 3 hours without stopping. St. Catherine's Hospital stood at the edge of the city beneath a sky swollen with black clouds. The main building was a concrete tower built in the 1970s, connected by enclosed bridges to several older wings. Rain poured from broken gutters, and red emergency lights reflected across the wet parking lot. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant, burnt coffee, and damp clothing. A nurse named Celia Grant met me outside Matthew's room. She was in her 40s, with short dark hair and the calm manner of someone accustomed to frightened families. "He's awake," she said. "He's confused, but that's normal after a concussion." Matthew lay beneath a thin blue blanket with his leg suspended in a brace. When he saw me, he smiled. "You look terrible. I drove through a storm because you tried to race a guardrail." The guardrail cheated. His humor reassured me, but his eyes kept moving toward the doorway. "What is it?" I asked. "The old man across the hall." I glanced outside. The opposite room was empty. "What old man?" "He keeps asking what year it is." Celia checked Matthew's for. "There's no patient across the hall. He was standing there 5 minutes ago." "You may have dreamed it," she said. Matthew looked at me. He was wearing a hospital gown with buttons down the front. "Who wears those anymore?" At 11 p.m., Celia told me visiting hours were over. A storm had flooded several roads, however, so she arranged for me to sleep in an unused family room on the 8th floor. "Take the central elevator," she said. "The east elevators are being serviced." A maintenance worker standing nearby looked up sharply. He wore gray coveralls and carried a metal toolbox. His name patch read Russell. "Central elevator sticks after midnight," he said. Celia frowned. "It was inspected last week." Russell looked at me. "If the floor display goes blank, get out before it chooses a number." Celia gave an embarrassed laugh. "Russell enjoys frightening visitors." "I don't," he said. "That's why I warned him." At 11:40, I checked on Matthew once more. He was asleep. The room across the hall remained empty, but a wet footprint darkened the floor just inside its doorway. Then another appeared. The marks crossed the empty room one by one, as though an invisible patient were walking toward the hall. I told myself the ceiling was leaking. I left before the footprints reached the door. The central elevator was empty. I pressed 8. As the car ascended, the fluorescent light flickered. The display moved normally through floors 4, 5, and 6. Then it went blank. I remembered Russell's warning and pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. A moment later, the display showed 19. The doors opened. Beyond them stretched a hospital corridor painted pale green. Old-fashioned glass lamps glowed along the walls. Steel carts stood beside wooden doors, and the air carried a sweet, scorched smell beneath the antiseptic. A sign hung from the ceiling. Surgical ward authorized personnel only. I remained inside the elevator and pressed the close button. The doors did not move. At the far end of the corridor, a nurse pushed a patient on a gurney. Her uniform included a white dress and stiff cap. The patient's body was covered by a sheet. The nurse stopped. Without turning around, she said, "Mr. Keller, your brother is ready." I stepped backward. The elevator doors slammed shut. When they reopened, I was on the 8th floor. I found Russell waiting beside the elevators. "You saw it," he said. "What is floor 19? There is no 19th floor." "I know what I saw." Russell glanced toward a security camera. "Keep your voice down." He led me into a utility closet crowded with electrical panels and cleaning supplies. The ventilation fan rattled overhead. "St. Catherine's used to have 3 separate hospitals on this property," he said. "The original building opened in 1912. Another wing was added during the war. The tower came later." "What does that have to do with floor 19? "The buildings were never properly separated." I stared at him. "They're connected by bridges." "Not physically." Russell opened his toolbox and removed several photocopied floor plans. Each showed a different version of the hospital. The first was dated 1936. The second, 1979. The third carried a date 22 years in the future. The layouts overlapped in impossible ways. People started reporting extra floors after the East Wing fire in 1989, he said. Patients entered elevators and returned days later. Some returned before they entered. "That's impossible." Russell handed me a photograph. It showed the hospital lobby filled with firefighters after the 1989 blaze. I stood near the reception desk. My face was unmistakable. I wore the same raincoat I had on that night. On the back, someone had written, "Unknown male found wandering from surgical ward." My hands began shaking. I wasn't alive in 1989. Maybe not from where you entered. An alarm sounded in the corridor. A voice came over the hospital speakers. "Code Gray, room 712. Matthew's room." I ran. His bed was empty. The 4 tubing lay across the mattress, neatly disconnected. His leg brace was still raised above the bed. Celia stood near the window, pale and speechless. "Where is he?" "I stepped out for medication," she said. The door alarm never sounded. On the floor beside the bed was an old paper wristband. Matthew Keller admitted. October 17th, 1951, a scream echoed from the empty room across the hall. We entered together. The room had changed. The walls were tiled, and a rusted examination table stood beneath a hanging lamp. An elderly man sat on the edge of it. I recognized Matthew's eyes. His face was deeply lined. His hair was white, and his broken leg had healed crookedly. "Andrew," he whispered. Celia staggered backward. I approached him. "Matthew," he began crying. "You took so long." He grabbed my wrist with both hands. "I've been here 58 years. The room flickered. For an instant, he was young again, wearing the hospital gown I had seen earlier. Then he was old, then young. "They keep moving me," he said. "Every time I wake up, the hospital is different." "Who does?" "The surgeons." The overhead light went out. In the darkness, wheels squeaked beyond the door. Russell appeared and pulled me into the hallway. "We have to reach him before they operate." "That is Matthew." "It's one version of him." Celia stared at us. "What are you talking about?" Before Russell could answer, the elderly Matthew vanished. The examination room returned to normal. On the wall, written in condensation, were 3 words, "Operating Room 19." We took the east elevator. Russell opened the control panel and connected 2 wires from his toolbox. "The elevator doesn't move to the extra floors," he said. "The hospital moves around the elevator." "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't have to." Celia joined us despite Russell's warning. "I lost a patient," she said. "I'm not staying behind." The lights dimmed. The floor display cycled through numbers that did not exist. B3, 14A, then 19. The doors opened onto the surgical ward. This time, it was not empty. Patients filled the corridor. Some wore modern gowns. Others lay inside iron lung machines or sat restrained in wooden wheelchairs. A wounded soldier stared at a digital monitor. A young woman held a newborn wrapped in newspaper dated 2037. No one spoke. They watched the operating room doors at the end of the hall. Celia checked the nearest patient's wristband. "This woman died here in 1974, she whispered. The woman turned toward her. Not yet. A bell rang. The operating room doors opened. Matthew lay strapped to a table beneath a cluster of lights. He was young again. His eyes were open. Figures in surgical gowns surrounded him. Their masks were made from pages torn out of calendars. Dates shifted across the paper as they breathed. One surgeon looked toward me. "Family consent is required." "No," I said. A clipboard appeared in my hands. The form described a procedure called temporal correction. The risks included memory loss, chronological displacement, and replacement by a compatible outcome. "What are you doing to him?" The surgeon tilted its head. "The patient exists in too many conditions. We are selecting the one most likely to survive." Matthew strained against his restraints. "They're going to send something back in my place." The figures turned toward him. One pushed a syringe into his fore. Every clock in the ward began moving backward. Russell grabbed a metal oxygen cylinder and struck the nearest surgeon. The figure collapsed, scattering calendar pages across the floor. The other surgeons did not attack. They began writing on their clipboards. Russell suddenly aged before my eyes. His shoulders folded. His hair turned white. Then he became a child drowning inside his oversized coveralls. "Stop documenting him," Celia shouted. She tore a clipboard from one surgeon and threw it beneath a cart. The changes stopped. I reached Matthew and pulled at the restraints. The straps tightened around his wrists. The surgeon holding the consent form pointed to a glass wall. Behind it, I saw dozens of versions of my brother. One had died in the motorcycle crash. One had never bought the motorcycle. One was a child in our mother's arms. One stood at my funeral. "You may take one," the surgeon said. "The remainder belonged to the hospital. I want my brother." "Which one?" The question struck harder than I expected. The Matthew on the table looked terrified. He had the right memories, the right scar above his eyebrow, the same bitterness about our mother's final months. But so might the others. The hospital wanted me to hesitate. I remembered something Matthew had said after our mother died. He had blamed me for signing the papers that ended her life support. We had never spoken about it again. I leaned close. "What did you say to me in the parking garage after Mom died?" His eyes filled with tears. "I said you killed her." "And what did I say?" "You said I was a coward because I made you choose." I released the breath I had been holding. "That's him." I grabbed the surgical light and pulled it down onto the operating table. Sparks erupted. The ward shuddered. Doors appeared along every wall, opening onto hospitals from different eras. Orderlies ran through one doorway during the 1918 flu epidemic. Smoke poured through another from the East Wing fire. Through a third, I saw St. Catherine's abandoned beneath a red sky. Celia cut Matthew's restraints with surgical scissors. Russell, restored to his proper age, opened the elevator doors manually. The surgeons gathered behind us. They did not run. They walked with the patient certainty of people who believed time would eventually deliver us back to them. We pushed Matthew into the elevator. A surgeon caught my arm. Its calendar mask opened down the middle. Behind it was my own face, older and covered in surgical scars. "You already consented," it said. I tore free. Celia struck the emergency close button. The doors met between us. The elevator dropped. For several seconds, the display showed dates instead of floors. Then the lights went out. When they returned, We were in the lobby. Rain struck the glass entrance doors. Only 11 minutes had passed since Matthew disappeared. Hospital administrators blamed his removal on a security failure. They found no floor 19 and no unusual footage from the elevators. Russell resigned the next morning. Celia transferred to another hospital. Matthew recovered, though he sometimes remembers things that never happened. He insists he had a wife on floor 19 and 2 daughters born in 1982. St. Catherine's Hospital demolished the east elevators the following year. That should have ended it. Last month, Matthew called me at 3 in the morning. He said he had awakened in his apartment and found an operating room scar running down his chest. Doctors could not explain it. An X-ray revealed something beneath his ribs. Not a medical instrument. An elevator button. It was small, circular, and engraved with the number 19. Yesterday, Matthew pressed the skin above it. Every elevator in St. Catherine's opened at once. And from somewhere inside my apartment wall, a surgeon calmly asked for my consent. Story 3. The nurses at Mercy Hollow Hospital entered room B12 every night at exactly midnight, even though no patient had been assigned to it in 23 years. The first time I followed them, I heard someone beneath the floor ask for my name. My name is Caleb Warren. I was 34 when I started working as a respiratory therapist at Mercy Hollow, a private hospital outside Scranton. My wife, Elena, was 8 months pregnant, and I had accepted the night position because it paid more and gave me enough daytime hours to help prepare for the baby. The hospital looked respectable from the outside. 6 floors of smoked glass rose above a landscaped entrance. But the building had been expanded so many times that the interior felt stitched together. New corridors ended in old brick. Modern elevators opened beside stairwells that smelled of wet concrete. In the basement, the heating pipes groaned like something turning in its sleep. On my first shift, the charge nurse, Marianne Holt, gave me a tour. She was compact, silver-haired, and severe without being unkind. At 11:55, she said, "You return all portable oxygen units to their assigned stations, even if they're in use, especially if they're not." She handed me a laminated card titled Midnight Protocol. The instructions were strange. Do not use the south elevator between 11:58 p.m. and 12:12 a.m. Do not answer internal calls from extension 000. If the basement alarm sounds once, ignore it. If it sounds twice, report to the chapel. At the bottom, in red letters, was one final rule. Do not enter room B12. I looked up. What's in B12? Nothing you're responsible for. A younger nurse named Priya Desai was stocking medication nearby. She glanced at Marianne, then at me. Just follow the card, she said quietly. That night remained ordinary until midnight. I was checking a ventilator on the 4th floor when every digital clock changed from 11:59 to 12:01 without displaying 12 o'clock. The lights dimmed. Over the intercom, a soft chime sounded 3 times. Then the nurses stopped speaking. Every nurse on the floor turned toward the elevators at once. Marian stepped out of the station carrying a stainless steel basin. Priya followed with folded white sheets. 2 orderlies joined them, pushing an empty gurney. No one acknowledged me. They entered the south elevator. The doors closed. At 12:13, they returned. The sheets were wet. The basin was full of black water. The gurney was no longer empty. A shape lay beneath the blanket, narrow at the shoulders and too long at the legs. Something under the sheet moved its fingers. Marian saw me watching. "Go back to your patient," she said. The next morning, I checked the admission system. No transfer had been logged. No patient had been moved. Room B12 did not appear on the hospital map. I told myself it was some confidential procedure. Hospitals kept secrets for legitimate reasons. Psychiatric holds, organ donation, high-profile patients. Then people began disappearing. The first was Lucas Brenner, a hospital porter who joked constantly and knew every locked door in the building. He vanished after agreeing to cover the midnight linen run. Administration claimed he had resigned. Without collecting his paycheck, I asked Priya. She kept her eyes on the medication cart. Stop asking about Lucas. He has a 7-year-old son. I know. Then why are you pretending this is normal? Her hands tightened around a box of syringes. Because I want to go home after my shift. 2 nights later, I found Lucas's identification badge beneath a radiator in the basement. It was damp and smelled faintly of seawater. On the back, someone had scratched 3 words into the plastic. It knows voices. I took the badge to hospital security. The director of security, Raymond Sloan, closed his office door before I finished explaining. He was a heavy man with tired eyes and a wedding ring he twisted whenever he lied. You found nothing, he said. I have his badge. Give it to me. What happened to him? Mr. Warren, your wife is due soon, correct? The question chilled me. What does that have to do with anything? Everything becomes easier when you remember what you have to lose. I left with the badge still in my pocket. That night, extension 000 called my work phone. I let it ring. After the 6th ring, my personal phone vibrated. Elena's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. Caleb. Her voice sounded weak. What's wrong? I think my water broke. I grabbed my coat. Then I remembered she was staying with her sister 40 miles away. Elena, where are you? At the hospital. Which hospital? A pause followed. The voice changed. Still Elena's tone, but flattened, as though spoken by someone reading from memory. Below you. The call ended. At midnight, I followed the nurses. They entered the south elevator. I waited until the doors nearly closed and slipped inside. Marian stared at me. You need to get out. Not without answers. Priya looked frightened. The elevator descended past the basement. B1. B2. B3. Then the display went blank. The air became damp and cold. Water trickled down the metal walls, though the ceiling remained dry. When the doors opened, I saw a corridor made of old stone. Electric lamps had been bolted into arched brickwork. Rusted pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping onto a floor worn smooth by decades of footsteps. At the far end stood a red door marked B12. The empty gurney waited beside it. Marianne turned to me. You cannot speak once we enter. Why? Because it repeats what it hears. Priya handed me a surgical mask. Wear this. The red door opened from the inside. Beyond it was an operating theater older than the hospital above. Tiered benches circled a stone table. Surgical instruments lay in shallow trays, their metal dark with age. 6 surgeons stood around the table. Their gowns were modern, but their masks had been stitched shut across the mouth. On the table lay a man I recognized. Lucas. He was alive. His eyes moved toward me, but his body remained still. A tube ran from his chest into a circular opening in the floor. Something below inhaled through it. The sound was deep, wet, and slow. I stepped forward. Marian caught my arm. A surgeon raised one finger. Silence. Another surgeon opened a ledger. Lucas's name was written beside a date. Below it were dozens of others. Employees. Patients. Visitors. Some entries went back more than a century. At the bottom of the page was a new name. Elena Warren. I forgot the rule. No, the floor answered in Elena's voice. Caleb. Every surgeon turned toward me. The opening beneath the table widened. Black water rose through the stone ring, carrying the smell of flooded soil and old blood. Something pale shifted below the surface, too large to see at once. Lucas's lips moved. Don't let it learn the baby. The thing beneath us repeated his words perfectly. Don't let it learn the baby. Marianne pulled me behind a curtain as the surgeons lifted Lucas from the table. What is it? I whispered. She pressed a finger to her lips, but it was too late. The floor whispered back, "What is it?" Then dozens of voices joined it. Men, women, children, some crying, some laughing, some pleading. Priya dragged us into a side chamber and locked the door. Inside were shelves filled with wax cylinders, cassette tapes, answering machines, and digital recorders. Every device was labeled with a name. "What is this place?" I asked. Marian finally answered. The hospital was built over a charity infirmary. Before that, the land belonged to a surgeon named Elias Venn. During an epidemic, he believed death could be delayed if suffering was transferred from one body to another. "That thing is Venn." "No, it is what answered him." Priya picked up one of the recorders. "It copies voices first, then memories. Eventually, it can call people here using someone they trust." "And the operations?" Marianne looked toward the locked door. "We remove what it has learned." "You cut memories out of people?" "We cut pathways, speech, faces, sometimes entire identities." I thought of Lucas on the table. That's why people disappear. If they return, it follows through them. A heavy knock struck the door. Elena's voice came from the other side. "Caleb, please open it." I nearly reached for the handle. Then another voice spoke. My own. "She is in labor." I checked my phone. No signal. The thing continued in my voice. "You will miss the birth." The door bent inward. Marianne opened a cabinet and removed a glass vial filled with cloudy liquid. "What is that?" "Every administrator carries one." "For what?" "To make us forget enough to continue." She uncorked it and poured the liquid over the recording shelves. Priya struck a match. The room ignited. Flames raced across the tapes and paper labels. Thousands of trapped voices screamed at once. The sound beneath the floor became violent. The stone walls shook. We ran into the operating theater. The surgeons were gone. Lucas lay beside the opening, free of the tubes. I helped Priya lift him onto the gurney. The black water had risen to the edge. Faces moved beneath its surface. Not bodies. Only faces, opening and closing their mouths as though testing voices. One of them was Elena's. One was mine. The hospital alarm sounded twice. Above us, the chapel bell began ringing. Marianne pushed the gurney toward the elevator. "The protocol is failing." A voice came over the underground speakers. It belonged to Raymond Sloan. "All personnel report to containment positions." Doors opened along the corridor. Doctors, nurses, orderlies, and administrators emerged carrying surgical tools. They were not trying to escape. They were coming to protect it. Raymond stood among them. "You don't understand what happens if it gets hungry," he said. "You fed it, Lucas. We feed it one person at a time, so it doesn't take a whole ward." Lucas opened his eyes. "You told my son I quit." Raymond looked away. The floor split behind us. A pale shape rose from the water. It had no stable body. Limbs formed wherever voices came from, each mouth creating another piece of it. A woman's hand reached out while a child's face opened along its wrist. It called me in Elena's voice, then in my unborn daughter's voice. "Daddy." I froze. Priya slapped me. "The baby has never spoken." That broke the illusion. I grabbed an oxygen cylinder from the gurney and threw it into the operating theater fire. Marianne understood immediately. She pulled the alarm and dragged us into the elevator. The cylinder exploded. Heat punched through the corridor. The stone floor collapsed, taking the operating table, the surgeons, and several administrators with it. The pale thing screamed in every voice it had ever stolen. The elevator rose as black water poured into the shaft below us. Raymond forced his arm between the closing doors. "Without it," he shouted, "the sick will keep their suffering." Marianne pushed his hand away. That was always theirs. The doors shut. We reached the main floor at 12:12. The hospital above us was silent. No alarms. No smoke. only the smell of burnt tape drifting through the vents. Administration blamed the basement collapse on an old water main. Lucas survived, though he lost his ability to recognize faces. Priya testified to the police. Marion disappeared before investigators could question her. Mercy Hollow closed 6 months later. Elena gave birth safely to our daughter, Rose. For 3 years, I believed the thing beneath the hospital had died. Then Rose began talking in her sleep. At first, she used ordinary words. Last week, I heard her reciting names I recognized from the ledger. Lucas Brenner, Marion Holt, Elias Venn. When I woke her, she smiled at me in the darkness. Then, in the exact voice of my missing supervisor, my 3-year-old daughter whispered, "Midnight protocol begins when the last patient closes their eyes." Story 4. The first wall I saw breathe was outside the pediatric intensive care unit. It expanded beneath the paint, held the air for 3 seconds, then released it with a damp sound that made every monitor in the corridor go silent. My name is Evan Brooks. I was 37 when I took a temporary maintenance contract at Briar Hill Medical Center in northern Ohio. I had worked commercial plumbing and ventilation for nearly 15 years, and I had seen flooded basements, cracked foundations, mold hidden behind expensive walls, and enough bad wiring to distrust every old building. Nothing had prepared me for a hospital with a pulse. I accepted the night contract because my wife, Claire, had been laid off, and our 8-year-old son, Noah, needed surgery to correct a heart defect. Briar Hill offered reduced medical costs to contracted employees. I told myself 3 months of overnight work was a small price to pay. The hospital had been built in stages around a stone surgical building from the 1920s. From outside, it looked like several different hospitals had collided and been sealed together with concrete bridges. Inside, the hallways bent around old courtyards, service doors opened onto bricked passages, and air vents carried smells from departments several floors away. On my first shift, the facility's supervisor, Martin Kessler, handed me a ring of keys and a radio. Martin was a dry, careful man in his late 50s. He wore his tool belt even in the office and never sat with his back to the door. "Most calls are temperature complaints," he said. "Radiators knocking, rooms too cold, rooms too warm. What about structural work? You report it. You don't open anything marked sealed." He gave me a folded map. Several areas were shaded black. Old utility spaces. Decommissioned. What's beneath the original wing? Martin looked at me longer than necessary. "Nothing we use." The other night technician was Lena Ortiz, an electrician with quick hands and no patience for superstition. She had worked at Briar Hill for 6 years. When Martin left, she pointed to the black areas on my map. "If he tells you nothing is there, something is there. You've checked." I like keeping my job. At 1:20 a.m., we received a call from pediatrics. The ventilation had stopped in rooms 414 through 419. The corridor was unusually warm when we arrived. It smelled faintly sweet, like overripe fruit beneath disinfectant. Nurses stood outside the patient rooms, manually checking equipment. A respiratory therapist named Aaron Cho met us near the wall panel. "Airflow died all at once," he said. Then the monitors reset. Lena removed the panel cover. The wiring looked normal. I put my hand against the wall. It was warm. Then it moved. The surface swelled beneath my palm, not from trapped air or water pressure. It rose smoothly, pushing my hand outward, then sank again. I stepped back. "Did you feel that?" Lena touched the wall. "Nothing happened." Aaron frowned. "What are we looking at?" Before I could answer, every heart monitor in the corridor produced the same slow beat. Once. Twice. 3 times. The patients had different conditions and different rhythms, but the screens pulsed together. Then the ventilation returned. Martin arrived 10 minutes later. When I described the wall, his expression did not change. Thermal expansion. Drywall doesn't inhale. You're tired. Aaron opened his mouth, but Martin looked at him. The respiratory therapist lowered his eyes. I noticed a dark patch spreading beneath the paint near the baseboard. Martin covered it with his shoe. Work order closed, he said. The next incident happened 2 nights later. A portable ultrasound machine left radiology by itself. Security footage showed it rolling through 3 corridors, turning corners, and stopping outside an empty operating room in the original wing. No one touched it. Its power cable dragged behind it like a tail. Lena and I found it facing a blank wall. The screen displayed an image. At first, I thought it was a fetus. Then I realized the shape was too large and too complex. Thick chambers opened and closed around a central cavity. Vein-like structures spread beyond the edges of the display. The machine was scanning something behind the wall. Lena unplugged it. The image remained. A soft thump came from inside the plaster. The ultrasound probe lifted from its holder and pressed itself flat against the wall. Lena backed away. That's enough for me. I called Martin. He arrived carrying a long metal case I had never seen before. Without asking questions, he opened the case and removed a syringe the size of a caulking gun. It was filled with cloudy red fluid. "What is that?" I asked. "Sealant." He inserted the needle through the drywall. The wall contracted around it. Not cracked. Contracted. The building made a low sound beneath our feet. The ultrasound screen went black. Martin turned to us. "You will both forget what you saw." Lena laughed nervously. "Is that an order?" "It's how people stay employed here." The following week, Noah was admitted for preoperative testing. I had tried to schedule it at another hospital, but Briar Hill's reduced cost agreement applied only on site. Claire brought him in during my shift. He looked too small in the hospital bed, surrounded by wires and white sheets. He tried to act brave. "Is this where you fix toilets?" he asked. "Mostly people complaining about air conditioning." Claire gave me a tired smile. The surgeon, Dr. Miriam Vale, explained the procedure with calm precision. She was in her 40s, sharply dressed, and spoke to Noah directly rather than over him. "You'll be asleep," she told him. "When you wake up, your heart will work better." Noah touched the center of his chest. "Will I feel different?" "Eventually." As Dr. Vale spoke, I noticed the wall behind her flex. A shallow indentation formed in the paint, shaped almost like an ear. Listening. That night, Noah woke screaming. Claire called me from his room. "He says someone is under the bed." I checked beneath it. Nothing. Noah gripped my arm. "It's not a person," he whispered. "It's the room." "What do you mean?" "It knows my heart is broken." The floor beneath the bed gave one gentle thud. A nurse entered and increased his sedative. When I stepped into the corridor, Aaron was waiting. "You've noticed it," he said. "The building." He looked toward the nurse's station. "Not here." He took me to a stairwell where the cameras had been removed. "Patients recover differently in Briar Hill," he said. "Some improve faster than they should. Others get weaker without explanation." "What does that have to do with the walls?" "It reacts to pain. More trauma means more activity." "You're saying the hospital feeds on patients?" "I'm saying when the intensive care unit is full, the building gets warmer." He showed me a notebook filled with dates, patient counts, power fluctuations, and unexplained structural changes. A pattern was obvious. Every major renovation followed a period of unusually high mortality. The hospital was growing. "Martin knows," I said. "Administration knows. Vale knows. Most department heads know. Why keep it open?" Aaron's face tightened. "Because it also heals." He told me about a nurse whose cancer vanished after she spent 3 nights in the old wing. A premature infant whose lungs developed in hours. A surgeon whose crushed hand regained full movement. "It takes something," Aaron said. "Then it gives something back." "What does it take?" "Memories. Fear. Pain. sometimes people. The next morning, Noah's surgery was moved forward. Dr. Vale claimed a cancellation had opened the schedule. Martin found me in the maintenance office before I could reach Claire. You need to let the procedure happen. You know what's inside this place. I know your son needs a working heart. At what cost? Martin looked older than he had the week before. My daughter had leukemia. Briar Hills saved her. Where is she now? He did not answer. The radio on his belt crackled. A voice came through in Noah's tone. Dad, I ran. His room was empty. Claire stood beside the bed, frantic. They said they were taking him for surgery. No one called me. They had paperwork. The bed's wheels had left wet tracks across the floor. Lena met me at the service elevator. I saw where they took him. The elevator descended below the listed basement. The display showed no floor number, only a red line pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The doors opened into heat. The space beyond was not a utility level. The walls were dark red and glossy. Thick cords ran along the ceiling, tightening and relaxing. Pale membranes stretched between support columns. Pipes disappeared into openings that closed around them like lips. Lena covered her mouth. This is inside it. We followed the bed tracks through a tunnel that narrowed behind us. The floor was soft beneath my boots. Somewhere nearby, liquid rushed through enormous hidden chambers. We found Aaron beside a row of breathing machines embedded in the wall. Each machine moved on its own. Tubes extended from them into translucent sacks containing shadows of former patients. One sack held a woman, Martin's daughter. She had not aged. Her eyes opened as we passed. Don't let it remember you, Aaron whispered. What does that mean? It keeps copies. A speaker formed from the wall beside him. My own voice came through it. I'm here because Noah needs surgery. Then Claire's voice. I'm afraid he'll die. The building had been recording us through vents, walls, and equipment. It was learning what mattered. We reached a chamber shaped like an operating theater. Noah lay on a table beneath a ring of lights. Dr. Vale stood over him with 3 surgeons. Behind the table, the wall had opened into a huge cavity. Something beat inside it. Not a heart. A cluster of chambers folding into one another, each lined with human faces pressed beneath translucent tissue. I recognized patients from the hospital. Some living, some dead. Martin stood beside the cavity. This is the source, he said. No, Aaron whispered. It's a stomach. Dr. Bill looked at me. Your son's heart cannot sustain him much longer. Get him away from that thing. It can rebuild him. What will it take? She looked toward Claire, who had followed us into the chamber. The wall behind her opened. Hands formed from the membrane and seized her shoulders. I lunged, but Martin blocked me. It needs an equal bond, he said. Something loved for something repaired. Claire screamed my name. Noah woke. Mom. The chamber contracted. Every face inside the organ opened its mouth. Dr. Vale reached for the surgical controls. I grabbed a steel tray and struck her arm. Lena cut the power cables feeding the operating ring. Sparks sprayed across the chamber. The building convulsed. Medical equipment tore free from the walls and rolled toward us. For stands bent like insect legs. Defibrillator paddles dragged themselves across the floor. Aaron released Claire by cutting through the membrane. Dark fluid poured out, hot and thick, carrying fragments of voices. Martin shouted over the noise. You'll kill everyone connected to it. I looked at the sacks embedded in the walls. Some patients were awake, watching us. Some were begging without sound. This isn't saving them, I said. It's preserving them. Noah cried out. The organ behind him opened wider. A smaller shape moved inside it. A perfect copy of my son. It opened its eyes before Noah closed his. The building was not healing patients. It was replacing them. I pulled Noah from the table. The copy began pushing through the membrane, wearing his face but smiling with Dr. Vale's calm expression. Claire helped me carry him toward the elevator. Lena stayed behind at the power controls. "Go," she shouted. "What are you doing?" "Giving it indigestion." She overloaded the surgical generators. The lights became painfully bright. The hidden organ tightened around every tube and cable at once. Aaron ran with us as the chamber began collapsing. Behind us, equipment screamed through electronic alarms. The copy of Noah crawled free and followed on hands and knees, moving faster than any child could. We reached the elevator. The doors began closing. The copy wedged its fingers between them. It looked at me. "Dad, don't leave me." For 1 second, it sounded exactly like him. Then the real Noah whispered against my shoulder, "That isn't scared." I kicked the thing's hand away. The door shut. An explosion moved through the building like a seizure. We surfaced in the emergency department. Every patient monitor went black, then restarted with normal rhythms. Briar Hill evacuated after severe structural damage was discovered beneath the original wing. Administrators blamed an undocumented sinkhole. Dr. Vale and Martin were listed among the missing. Lena was never found. Noah's surgery was performed later at another hospital. He recovered. Briar Hill was demolished the following year. At least, the part above ground was. Last month, contractors began building a rehabilitation center on the same property. Noah and I drove past it. He stared at the unfinished concrete foundation. "Dad," he said, "that building remembers me." I asked how he knew. He pointed to a row of new ventilation openings. Warm air moved through them in slow, steady breaths. Then every opening whispered my son's name with the voice of the thing we left underground. Story 5. The discharge nurse smiled when she cut the plastic band from my wrist, but the band was back in place before I reached the elevator. By then, I had already begun forgetting my wife's face. My name is Samuel Price. I was 38 when I entered St. Orson Medical Center for what should have been a routine overnight observation. I had fainted at a grocery store after several weeks of headaches and poor sleep. The emergency physician found nothing alarming, but my wife, Julia, insisted I stay until the neurological tests were complete. Our son, Ethan, was 7. He had cried when the ambulance doors closed. "I will be home tomorrow," I told him. That promise became the only thing in the hospital I could trust. St. Orson stood outside Harrisburg, surrounded by flat fields and a dense belt of pine trees. Rain blurred the upper floors when I arrived. Inside, pale green walls reflected fluorescent light, and the air tasted of dust, antiseptic, and reheated soup. A nurse named Clara led me to Ward 7. She was young, soft-spoken, and wore white gloves even when she was not touching patients. "You will be evaluated in the morning," she said. "What time can my wife visit?" "After your adjustment period." "You mean observation?" She paused. "Yes, observation." My roommate, Lionel Graves, looked about 60. He had a gray beard, bruised hands, and a habit of counting the ceiling tiles. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 3 breakfasts. 3 days. He frowned. "I suppose." At 9 that evening, Dr. Merrick examined me. He had narrow shoulders, spotless shoes, and a voice so calm it made every question sound foolish. "Your scans show no damage," he said. "Then I can leave tomorrow?" "That depends on whether you are ready for the outside." "I have a job and a family." "I am ready." He wrote something on his clipboard. Attachment fixation remained strong. I laughed. He did not. The next morning, Clara returned with my discharge papers. I signed them, dressed, and followed her through the lobby. Julia and Ethan waited beyond the glass doors. Ethan pressed both hands against the window. I hurried forward. The doors opened. I stepped into Ward 7. My bed stood exactly where I had left it. Lionel continued counting tiles. Clara was beside me again, holding the same clipboard. "You became disoriented," she said. I walked through the exit. You attempted to leave before your treatment was complete. I ran back to the lobby. The doors now opened onto a long corridor lined with patient rooms. Sunlight shone at the far end, though every window I passed showed nighttime rain. I chose a stairwell instead. One flight down led to Ward 7. One flight up led to Ward 7. After 6 attempts, my legs shook too badly to continue. Lionel watched me return. "Never take the stairs after discharge," he said. "You knew?" "I knew once." That afternoon, I called Julia from the nurse's station. A woman answered. "Hello." Her voice sounded right. "Julia, it is me." A long silence followed. "Samuel died 3 years ago," she said. The line went dead. I demanded to see Dr. Merrick. He arrived with Clara and a hospital administrator named Mrs. Voss, a severe woman wearing a navy suit. "The outside is unstable," she told me. "Your memories may not correspond with current conditions." My wife said I was dead. That may be true in one version of events. What does that mean? Dr. Merrick placed a photograph on the table. It showed Julia, Ethan, and me standing outside our house. Julia's face was blurred. Ethan had no eyes. "You are trying to preserve people who may never have existed," he said. I turned the photograph over. In my handwriting were the words, "Do not believe the first family." I did not remember writing them. That night, I met another patient named Nia Benton in the laundry room. She was 29, sharp-eyed, and had written her own name repeatedly across both arms. "They change the ward while we sleep," she whispered. "They change us too. How long have you been here?" "I was admitted after a car accident." "When?" She showed me her wristband. The date had been scratched away. Lionel joined us carrying a stolen ring of keys. "There is an old admissions office below the kitchen," he said. "Real records. Not the ones they show us." We waited until midnight medication rounds. When Clara entered our room, we pretended to swallow the pale blue tablets and hid them beneath our tongues. At 12:30, the ward became silent. Not quiet. Silent. The ventilation stopped. The lights ceased buzzing. Even the rain vanished from the windows. We slipped into the corridor. The hallway stretched farther than it had during the day. Doors continued beyond the limits of the building, each marked with a patient's name instead of a room number. One door bore mine. Behind it, I heard Ethan laughing. I reached for the handle. Nia grabbed my wrist. "Ask something only he would know." I leaned close. "What did you hide in the red toolbox?" The laughter stopped. A child's voice answered, "My bicycle." Ethan had hidden a broken plastic dinosaur there. We kept walking. The service elevator accepted Lionel's stolen key. Instead of floor numbers, the panel listed stages. Admission. Acceptance. Recovery. Release. Lionel pressed release. The elevator descended. When the doors opened, we entered a vast ward with no visible end. Thousands of beds stood beneath dim lights. Patients slept with photographs resting on their chests. Nurses moved between them, quietly replacing the pictures. A woman woke and looked at the photograph in her hands. "That is not my daughter," she said. A nurse injected her. When the woman woke again, she kissed the picture. Nia whispered, "They are teaching people new lives." We found the admissions office behind a glass partition. Inside, filing cabinets rose to the ceiling. My file contained records of 11 discharges. Each ended with readmission. In one report, I had returned voluntarily after discovering my family did not recognize me. In another, Julia had welcomed me home, but Ethan had called me by a different name. The latest note read, "Patient resistance decreasing. Final domestic replacement prepared." Nia found a newspaper clipping inside her file. Her car accident had happened 14 years earlier. Lionel stared at his own papers. "What does yours say?" I asked. He closed the folder. "That I work here." Footsteps approached. Dr. Merrick entered with Clara and 6 orderlies. The outside world is no longer habitable in its original form, he said. St. Orzin preserves continuity. You erase people, Nia said. We protect them from reality. Mrs. Voss appeared behind him. Most patients prefer the replacement once their painful attachments are removed. A wall beside the office folded open. Beyond it was my living room. Julia stood near the sofa. Ethan sat on the floor building a wooden train track. Every detail was perfect. The blue curtains, the family photographs, the scratch on the coffee table. Julia looked at me and began crying. Samuel, please come home. I stepped closer. Ethan ran toward me. Dad. His embrace felt warm. His hair smelled like the strawberry shampoo Julia bought him. I nearly believed it. Then he whispered against my chest. What did I hide in the red toolbox? He was asking me. The room was learning. I pushed him away. His face remained Ethan's, but his expression became Clara's calm, patient smile. Dr. Merrick sighed. You are making recovery unnecessarily difficult. The false living room began spreading into the admissions office. Carpet covered the tile. Wallpaper flowed across the filing cabinets. The hospital was replacing the room around us. Nia smashed the fire alarm. Nothing happened. Lionel handed me the ring of keys. There is one door they never use, he said. Why are you helping us? His face crumpled. Because I remembered my real name. It was not Lionel. His name was Bernard Graves, and he had once been an orderly assigned to restrain escaping patients. The hospital had erased him after he tried to help one. He pointed toward a narrow black door behind the filing cabinets. Go. The orderlies seized him. Nia and I ran. The black door opened onto a concrete passage filled with cold air. Behind us, Bernard screamed as Dr. Merrick calmly ordered another adjustment. The passage ended at a rusted emergency exit. A sign above it read, "Opening this door may result in permanent loss of treatment." Nia pushed the bar. The door opened onto a weed-filled field beneath a gray morning sky. We stepped outside. The hospital remained behind us for 3 seconds. Then it became an abandoned brick shell with shattered windows and trees growing through the roof. Police found us walking beside the highway. St. Orzin Medical Center had closed 31 years earlier after an electrical fire. Hundreds of former patients had never been located. Julia was alive. Ethan was 12, not 7. I had been missing for 5 years. He did not run into my arms when he saw me. He stood behind his mother and studied my face like a frightened stranger. I could not blame him. Some nights, I wake believing the hospital was the real world, and this family is another treatment. Yesterday, I found a pale blue tablet beneath my tongue. This morning, Ethan looked at me across the breakfast table and asked, very softly, "Are you ready to try being discharged again?"